pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Squire.
So first up, we have our student council liaison. So they can come up first, start us off, give us updates on what's going on.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jen Weinstein. I advise the high school student council. And tonight I have with me my president, John Gooley, and vice president Mason Brott. They accompanied me last month to the Capital District Youth Summit. And we found a presenter there. She was the keynote speaker who met one of the goals that student council set for themselves this year, which was to focus on the mental health needs of our high school students. So I'm very excited to tell you that she's going to be on campus on April 28th. She's free. And she puts on a phenomenal program, not only for the vast majority of the students, but her niche is a bit into these student athlete population. And Mason and Jim will tell you why that is. So she will be here for a big assembly, breakout sessions during lunches, and then has agreed to stay on campus to do a community forum for parents and the community. So that's why we're here today, is because not only do they want to show you what the program is about, but they would love your help to get the word out to the community that the event's happening. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to them. They've been practicing.
Okay, so our target is for stress, success, and teenage setbacks, and a lot of it is induced by mental health and, in some cases, substance abuse problems. So we're bringing in Stephanie Marchisano from the Harris Project on April 20th.
Okay, this is Harris. This is Stephanie's son. He tragically passed away due to an accidental overdose when he was 19 years old. And it really just got Stephanie into looking into his mental health and how the substance abuse that he was having was affecting that, and working together. So she really advocates for co-occurring disorder awareness, which we will talk about what that is, but it's the main thing about what happened with Harris. So she really wants to spread the news.
So CODA is targeted towards teens with mental health and substance abuse problems. And COD stands for co-occurring disorders, which are people who have mental health problems like anxiety, depression, bipolar, and PTSD, along with substance abuse problems with alcohol, medication, or other drugs.
So over 10.2 million people have co-occurring disorders, and most people have never even heard of it. There's three categories that usually you fall into: those who have a mental health disorder or multiple, who misuse substances in a misguided attempt to manage or self-medicate. There's also those who misuse substances and experience negative impacts, which cause them to have mental illnesses or like mental disorders. And then those who are predisposed to both mental health and substance abuse and kind of work with them together.
So about 22% of teens ranging from 13 to 18 are diagnosed or can be diagnosed with mental health disorders and or addictive disorders. About 50% of all mental illness cases begin at 14 and 75% begin at age 24. About 70% of misused substances are people who have co-occurring disorders.
So on Thursday, April 28th, Stephanie will come in and she's going to share her story about Harris and what she does with the students. And they're going to learn what they can say to their friends or their parents, or where to start and get help for themselves. Because a lot of this issue isn't really talked about together. Because at school, we have a section where you can talk to someone about your mental health, and then another person you can talk to about substance abuse. They don't really ever talk and meet. So those kind of get ignored together when they really work together. And then later on in the day, we're gonna have the parents and the community members come out to see how she can help them really work with their children and their children's friends, you know, just overall like to learn what they can do to help.
So we're going to start with an assembly during block 2 for all high school students. And then we'll go into block 3 with more, and she'll give more information and resources. And then she'll do some giveaways and try to get people to come to the breakout sessions. And during the breakout sessions, which I believe are during office hours, students can come in, any students can come in and do these activities, and they mainly focus on student athletes because those tend to be the people who have a lot of stress and need to manage things in order to not be overpowered and turn to things like substances. And then at 6:30, we're going to come back and talk to the parents and the community, and they'll learn how to recognize and address co-occurring disorders.
And then these are just some of the flyers that she has, and like to kind of get the word out while also kind of keeping people interested, because you try to get them to, you know, actually pay attention, because this is really important and a lot of people don't talk about it. Like her son Harris, he was a student athlete, he was very popular, like he knew so many people, yet not a lot of people just didn't know how hard he was struggling behind closed doors. Like even his own mother, sadly, which I know must really not be fun for her, but now she's trying to help as many people as she can. There's some more.
There's a few slides of those, but we'll be printing some out and changing them out throughout the school to get people, not, I don't know if we'll get them excited, but maybe grab their
interested a
attention.
little.
So,
Yeah.
And those could maybe be put out to the community and get them interested too.
If there's any questions, we're open to it. I don't know if we'll have the best answers, but we'll try our best.
I have a question. How did you guys get into this and hear about her?
We went to the annual youth summit up in Albany with like a few of our student council members, and she was one of the main speakers. And she also had a table out there, but we were really drawn to her because like the second I heard it, I was like, oh, this should be a speaker we should have. And we all like instantly agreed.
It definitely targets like us, and the way she speaks is also like it captures you and you don't really get bored. And I feel like she also doesn't talk in circles. Like she has a lot to say and it's not much repetition. Like there's always something new to learn.
Oh, that's great.
Do you think you'll have an interest in this for yourself, like in life and your careers?
Oh,
Like-
100%. It's definitely something that I've never thought about, because like personally I deal with like mental health disorders, like I have ADHD and anxiety, and I never thought like how bad it would be if I mixed substances into that. And the fact that someone else has and sadly lost their life, like it's really important that I think we get it out to people before they start, you know, accidentally like making mistakes that cost them their life.
And this speaker, along with a few other speakers that were there, it was kind of inspiring, but also made you aware for a lot of things you might not think about, especially now that we're going to college. Like, we need to be informed about these things and spread the information to other people that might not be informed about them.
Well, I applaud you for bringing this topic to our school and our community. I think this is great. Have you given some thought after April 28th, how you would keep the messaging going beyond April 28th?
Yeah, we actually talked to Stephanie today over Zoom, and she is about to go with the program SAD. I don't know. Do you remember what it stands for?
Students against drunk driving.
I think
Or
they changed
distracted,
it.
distracted.
Yeah. I would have thought that was but she's about to go national with this, and she wants to make little programs of like getting students involved to be like peer educators. So we talked to her, and maybe it would be a thing that we could get maybe like a club going or something like that.
Or even just make it like an annual presentation for, like, once we leave, if other kids aren't always involved with things like the youth summit. So maybe if like other upcoming student council members might be interested after they see it this year. And it could just trickle into.
I'm thinking maybe you can narrow down those students who would be interested and could carry the torch
Yeah.
for you guys once you go on to college.
We definitely have like a few people that are just always around and really interested in the things that we're learning. And get very involved in everything and want to keep like awareness on things like this and also new things that we might not even think about.
Again, congratulations on your good work.
Yes,
Thank you.
definitely.
I have another question, comment. You're saying that the two counselors don't speak, right? A student will see them for their mental health and then maybe their substance abuse. Are you hoping to bridge that gap, have the counselors start speaking to each other? And would you like that to happen?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that if it's in our, like, bringing it to our school will show, like, will maybe inspire our own counselors. And then the fact that it's going nationwide might inspire other counselors in other schools or not even schools, like other companies and stuff.
Yeah, because the big thing that she talked about was how people don't really know about co-occurring disorders. So that like branching never like met. So she really is looking forward to that because like her son like went through it, like he went to both and they just never talked to each other. So it just didn't work out.
And also the parents, like them as parents could talk to their kids' counselors and say, I think that these are going hand in hand, but they didn't know that. So I think that giving that information to like the parents in the community, that they might, like if they recognize it or learn how to recognize it, they'll know how to address it.
It's a good goal. I think New York State has that goal because there's two entities that coexist that deal with each, but how they come together is the trick. Just what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's,
I'm glad they shed that light for us.
yes, very nice.
Good job, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please.
Mr. Davis.
Introduce Mr. Daggett, Bill Daggett, who is here to present. As you know, we've had a lot of conversations about our 2030 destination and the mile markers such to get there. And a lot of that is tied to some of the work that Bill's been doing forever, you know, in many roles. As superintendent, working state ed 2 years, et cetera. He's been working with us for the last several months as well as we kind of get ourselves focused. In front of you, the timeline, some of those topics kind of connect to some of the things that he's going to talk about. He's going to focus particularly on just making sure that we're always thinking about how we are doing what we can to help kids be ready for their future.
Randy, good evening, everyone.
Well,
Let me begin by thanking you for being on the school board. I know the enormous pay you get and all the recognition and, you know, makes it worthwhile. But, my wife was on the school board for 32 years. Anybody close to that number? You've got 2 years to go. I'm gonna share some information. We got, well, mine up. Okay, great. The information I'm going to share relates to an initiative that your district has now become a part of with 121 other school districts across the country. And it came out of, let's see what, it came out of a national commission back in August 2020. I want you to think about that time frame for a moment. That was a few months into the pandemic. And in the spring of 2020, everybody thought that the pandemic and its impact on schools would be over by the fall. That didn't quite happen. And so the National Governors Association, the National School Boards Association, the Council of Chief State School Officers, that's the state commissioners across the country, and AASA, which is the American Association of School Superintendents, came together and said, we need to bring some thought leadership for school districts because it appears that this pandemic will be with us until at least next spring. And they were even off on that, obviously. So I brought together a national commission, 27 people, and they picked 12 of the nation's most respected thought leaders who were school superintendents. Gladys Cruz was one of those 12. Then they brought together the heads of the 5 largest tech companies in the country, the heads of the 5 largest educational foundations, and a series of other thought leaders. I had the privilege of co-chairing that national commission. We met every other week for 8 months, looking deep at not simply the pandemic, but what else was happening during that same period of time. But because we were so consumed by the pandemic, schools did not have their eye on it. For example, and leading the way was what these young ladies just talked about, an absolute explosion in mental health issues in this country. The second area was the fact that technology was about to take off and fundamentally change the American workplace, home, and society. The fact that the projection was that post-pandemic, 35% of all American workers would work from home permanently. And of the remaining 65%, 50% of them would spend at least a third of their time working from home remotely. 42% of all paid working hours in the country, people will be working from home. All kinds of implications to any one of these trends. So the commission came together, and for some reason that the clicker's not going real well. They made a series of recommendations, but what we quickly learned was, if any of you are around long enough to ever hear of the Nation at Risk, a major report in the late 1980s about American education, then No Child Left Behind, that national commissions in the past had basically sat on the shelf. And that if you really wanted to implement something, you had to get it deep into schools. And so we picked initially 50 schools and then expanded it to 121. Randy, that's where you came in. And it was a cross section of urban, suburban, and rural school districts cut across the country, representatives from every state in the country, to try to take the recommendations of the commission and provide support to those schools to implement those recommendations that that community was most comfortable with. Because you cannot move faster than the rate of readiness and trust. And today, the American education system has become a political lightning rod, as you all must know. And from the left to the right, enormous battles. What you can't do is get too far in front of your community and your staff, or you'll get derailed. And so one of the things we try to do is figure out very quickly with the school district, where are you? What's your community ready to begin to tackle? Now, Randy, I only know enough to be, this much to be dangerous about these 2 young ladies that were just here, but here's my hunch, based upon what they said and your questions. This community recognizes there's a growing mental health issue, by way of example. That's a readiness issue. But is there a trust issue by all the parents that they want you dealing with their kids' mental health issues? And so that's why I say readiness and trust up front. I say that because I'm going to show you some of the recommendations. I don't know that you're ready for all these recommendations. You've got to pick and choose that which you think this community, this staff is ready for. 3 central cultural things we identified. Number 1, that American schools, and I'm going to stand over here because I'm getting interference from the speaker with my clicker. That American schools need to focus on the whole learner. And by the way, we use the word learner, not student, only because student kind of depicts a passive traditional role. And today's kids need to be much more actively engaged in the learning process if you're going to motivate them. But our responsibility in American education is first and foremost academics. But most communities are beginning to recognize schools are responsible for a lot more than just academics, like mental health. That's the whole child issue. The other thing we began to recognize is that we've become polarized by all of the debates about equity and diversity. We made the decision not to get deep into that debate. We simply said that no child shall be marginalized because of their disability. Now, if you think about it, we've come a long ways since 94, 145, 142, which is the special ed legislation. From the 1960s to today, the services for the disabled is dramatically better. We've come a lot further in sex education with the opportunities for women and young ladies than we had in the 60s and 70s. So no child should be marginalized because of their disability or their sex or their race or their religion or their social economic status. The third recommendation is the one I want to talk about with you tonight, which is schools need to be more future leaning. We're preparing students for their future, not our past. And as we began to do that, we look deeply at some issues. How many of you in the room, including other of you around the side, how many of you got a driver's license within 1 month? You got at least your permit, okay, maybe not your license, but permit or license within 1 month of turning legal age to get your license? Hands up, let's see. Okay. See, these kids are an extension of this technology. But look at that data. They're not getting their driver's licenses nearly as often. Some of you have your own kids with this situation. Okay. Does that change their behavior and interaction in a lot of ways? Now, the next thing is a good thing that it changed, but it changed. How many of you had a friend in high school who drank adult alcoholic beverages out with another friend before they graduated from high school? Now, I know you didn't. But your friends did. Look at today's list. That's a good change. How many of you had at least one part-time job before you graduated from high school? How many of you had at least one date before you graduated from high school? Today's kids are different. They're different. But what else is different is the world they're about to enter. And it's being pushed by a number of issues, but I want to focus on the one on technology with you tonight. Let's look at retailing for a minute. This is the largest warehouse for Google in the country. It's 1/4 mile long. Those little carts you see in the middle, they're robots. And what happens is a tractor trailer or a train pulls up to the loading dock. The robots goes onto the train, onto the tractor trailer, pulls off the merchandise, puts it on a shelf. You order something, another robot goes, gets it, grabs it, puts a label on it, and out the door. Now, why do I show it to you? The largest warehouse in the country. 92% of all workers in that company are now technology workers in that warehouse. There's hardly any physical labor left. But it's not just low-end jobs. Look at finance and banking. This past year, 2/3 of all stock trades were driven by an algorithm, not by a person making a decision. By next year, that figure is now projected to be 98%. Randy, I could go for the next 2 hours with changes in the American workplace. I'm not going to do that. I just want to give you a snapshot because I want to show you what is about to come over us. And our tech guy over here probably knows more about it than anybody else in the room because as soon as he saw my PowerPoint, he quizzed me, okay, about this because he knew about it. It's called GPT. GPT. And you all are experiencing it and don't even recognize it. It has 3 levels. Level GPT 1. If any of you go to type an email and you type the first 2 or 3 letters of the person's email address that you're trying to contact, what happens?
Comes right up.
Comes right up, and you might have to pick because it'll be 4 or 5, but it comes up. Okay, that was GPT 1. I could give you other examples of it, but we all experienced that. Let me take you to GPT 2. Then you notice this, you go to write an email and you write the first 3 or 4 words, what happens? Yeah, do you know that the words it will give me are not the same they will give you? Yeah, it's based upon a pattern, it's based upon the phraseology I use. You know that if I almost always misspell a word, it will actually misspell the word too. Okay? It's based upon what I do. That's GPT-2, a little bit more powerful than the contact list. Another example is Amazon. Any of you been surprised about you order something and then what's happening?
Gives you lots of other suggestions that you
There's
can
something
shop
like
for.
that, right? And it's not the same for any of us.
No, no.
That's GPT-2. How many have ever used a GPS while driving? Now, let me tell you, if you come from Niskayuna, New York, which is where I came from tonight, to Coxsackie, and you put in, is it 24? Yeah, 24, what's the name of the street?
Sunset Boulevard.
What's that?
Sunset.
Sunset. I made the mistake of putting in 24 Sunset. And it took me to 24 Sunset Court. Does anybody know where that is in your town? Yeah. It's in the middle of nowhere. Okay.
Go to school.
But GPS, you all use it. I don't think we have thought about the impact that technology is having on brain development. I co-authored a book 5 years ago with a leading neuro researcher around what this technology was doing, because it's changing many things, which we'll talk about in a moment. GPT-3. And I'm not a betting man normally, but I'll bet anybody in this room that wants to bet me. And I will give you 10-to-1 odds in your favor. 90% of your kids will be using this by the next school year. Because it is over 100 times more powerful than GPT-2. So now you go to the type and first you put a subject matter in an email, and you type the first 3 or 4 words. It doesn't give you the next 3 or 4 words. It gives you the entire email. Yeah. With your phraseology, if you know anything about writing levels, with your Lexile writing level, it looks just like it's yours. The commission had a look, and we took 10 different people and asked them to start it using this technology. And not one of them, and not one person could tell the difference between the GPT generated email and the actual email written by the person. It's that good. Now, why is that an issue? You want to give a kid a writing assignment? Yeah. You want to ask them to write a short story? You want to write 3 paragraphs? All they got to do is put in the title. It will write the entire paper for them. Now, why is that a big issue? I used to run the Regents.
Yeah.
Do you understand the implications here for the Regents or your local testing? These are huge changes. You can write the email or the report. What's that do to literacy? What has spell check done to your ability to spell?
Lazy speller.
Lazy speller. And these kids will never have experienced any system other than that. Huge implications. Let me take it deeper. What's it do to brain development? If they're not going to be able to have to write longer pieces. You know, with the hippocampus is in the brain, which is a key skill that's part of the brain that schools develop. There are huge implications. And this is not something the board can resolve. Is that staff over there? Yeah, they're gonna have to resolve it, okay? And with the teachers. These are tough issues. And the problem is, it's gonna have people have different reactions in your community. So as you were talking about mental health here tonight, and I was so happy to hear the two young ladies say, you're gonna do something in the evening for parents. Now, Jack, Randy, you're gonna have to think about, how do we have this type of discussion with parents before you try to do anything? Because they won't understand why you're making the changes. If they don't understand the consequence of the changing technology, the changing student body you have. And what's it do to your instructional program? So these 121 districts, we've got some districts that are way out there in terms of these changes. We've got others who are just beginning. And what we're attempting to do is, with your staff, expose them to these other districts and what they're trying to do and how they have done it, so that they can come back and make some intelligent decisions about what you should do and how fast you should do it. Let me give you another one. Resume. I think it's called Enable. I think I got the right name. There's one of the new applications is you go to apply for a job. Now we're anticipating, I don't know if you know this, we're anticipating a 40% turnover in school superintendents in this country in the next 12 months. They're resigning all across the country. The job has become, in so many communities, so difficult. So this person goes to apply for a superintendency. That new app, it's an app, will do this. It will search everything about that school district, spend in any public information piece. It will search every one of you as board members. The app will then look at the candidate and write a resume specifically for that job that will target the priorities of that board. And it's a simple app. Give you another one. Want to build a budget? I'll bet you next year you will not build a budget the way you're building it this year because of the advancing technology. Because all you got to do is put in your primary considerations. It will build the budget and write the narrative.
There you go, right?
Sorry.
That's what we're saying.
Oh, there goes your gap.
Write test questions. I'm talking to the regents, the department staff on this one, because you want to write a test question. Suppose you have a high school science course or a high school social studies course or regents. And what you're trying to do is test the student's knowledge of the content and not their reading ability. It will look at that student's individual Lexile level and will write the same, measure the same content, but personalized to the individual student's Lexile and reading level. Fundamental shift. Or finally, I'll give you just one more example. Websites, web designers, jobs are gone. PTD3, create a website for you like that. We know what spell check they're like. GPS, spatial memory, we know has been dramatically reduced study after study. We know that spatial navigation, like I got out in the middle of nowhere here about 45 minutes ago and said, uh-oh, okay. Mental mapping, the ability to think. And so what do you do about it all? to give you some quick reactions of what we're beginning to see from some of the districts who were in year one with us of the National Commission's work. They said, we gotta change our instructional program. And we can. Right now, we deal with everything based upon proficiency. The proficiency model, one state test, all the kids. While we know the kids are dramatically different. Having run the state testing program, I can tell you that the state test, we've known for decades, does not challenge the top 1/3 of the kids. Because if you challenge the top 1/3 of the kids, 2/3 of the kids are going to fail the test. And every school in the state will be on the need improvement list. And the state test is always an incredible challenge for the bottom 1/3. This enables us to measure growth of a student because it can be personalized. But the question is, what are the skills the kids need? And we went to McKinsey. How many have ever heard of McKinsey? Because they're in the private, they're a huge research group in the private sector. They surveyed 18,000 companies for us nationwide. Remember, we had the big foundation that would helped us finance major studies here. They surveyed 18,000 companies in the country, cutting across every major industrial sector, small, medium, and large, to say, what are the skills you need today? And what's your projection by the year 2025? And first, physical and manual skills. We worked then with the U.S. Department of Education, U.S. Department of Labor, put all the jobs into the 5 quintiles, meaning the lowest 20% of paying jobs to the highest 20% of paying jobs. For the lowest paying jobs today, they spend about 50% of their time on physical and manual tasks. That figure drops by 2025 to 22% of their time. Why? That's why I showed you the example of Google's, or I'm sorry, Amazon's warehouse. Those jobs are going to be decimated. Basic cognitive skills, which I respectfully submit is the primary instructional program in New York State schools. That's the amount of time I spent on it. Some people say, well, it's not so important. And I would say to you, we adamantly disagree with that, because you can't do the rest of the stuff on the list if you don't have basic cognitive skills. Basic cognitive skills are essential. They're absolutely not adequate. Higher cognitive skills, which I'll define in a moment. Look at these. SEL skills. SEL skills. Social emotional development skills. Why so important? The next sentence may be the most important sentence I try to have you remember tonight. Is that GPT-3, if you can write an algorithm for the task, the job is gone. Because GPT-3 has algorithms that write algorithms 24/7. And so you have this explosion in the tasks that the technology can do that historically people had to do. You can't write an algorithm for social emotional skills. That's why it becomes so important, because an employer is going to only pay you for what the technology can't do faster, more efficiently than you. And then technological skills. We then went back to them this past summer and said, go back to all those companies, the 18,000 companies, and get far more specific about your terms. Define the terms. And we broke them into 4 major categories: cognitive skills, interpersonal skills, digital or technology related skills, and self-leadership skills. And basic cognitive skills are not new. And Randy, you're doing a great job with them. And they are absolutely essential. And they define them. Now, there's a couple new ones in here a little bit because of technology, but in general, we know how to teach these, we know how to, your staff's familiar with them, they're not controversial, essential. But the next area, they said, essential kids have are these interpersonal skills. Look at the list. How are you measuring those? How are you reporting those? That's where some of the 121 schools are working on. And many of them are a year or 2 years in front of where you will be. And that doesn't mean you got to do what they've done, because none of them done exactly the same way. But they're great laboratories for you to learn from. Next one, self-leadership skills. They define them. What instructional practices do you have in place in the district that requires the kids to develop and exhibit these attributes? And how are you assessing them? See, our state testing program only does the one on the left, still essential. Why does that become so important? Because we're still under this mindset that our primary purpose in education is to prepare kids for the next grade, the next test, and the next level of education. What percentage of students in the state of New York ultimately get a 4-year degree? Anybody want to guess? It's presently 11%. Of all kids, 11% end up with 4th degree. Or 60% of them are then employed in an area that they had no higher ed training in. Have you done a longitudinal study of your own staff, kids? Or do we just think, no, just once they do okay in the next grade and the next test, go on to college, everything will be okay? Why aren't they doing well? I will profess to you, it has more to do with the second and the third column than it does the first column. But I say again, don't go faster than the rate of readiness and trust of your community and your staff. We conclude we have an instructional design problem. Just a little bit more and I'm almost done. Now what happens when you take basic skills and interpersonal skills in a digital communication technology environment that you're going to live, work, and interact in? And through those 118 companies, we identify the skills. But as you look at these, we do not believe they should be new courses. You've got an overcrowded curriculum. You're not going to get more money to extend the school day and school year. Believe me, that's not going to happen. It's a remixing of the batter. And you got to do it in an evolutionary way. What happens when you take basic cognitive skills and self-leadership skills and bring them together? You have the higher cognitive skills. Okay, let's. And finally, what about when you take interpersonal and self-leadership and bring them together You have social and well-being skills, which, by the way, those young ladies were just talking about. Our staffs were never trained to do this. Our community expectation may not be there to think that's the role of the schools. But when we look quantifiably and quantitatively at all the data, it's very clear that we are not preparing kids for their future. We're preparing them for success of in the 20th century schools. As I conclude, how many in the room have a son or a daughter who's a preteen, a teen, or in the early 20s? Permit me to tell you what's going to happen to you. I have 5 children. My kids are older than your kids. My kids are more your age, okay? But let me tell you what's going to happen. Sometime in the next several years, your son or daughter is going to come home, and standing right next to them is going to be a young man or a young woman you're beginning to see a lot of and hear a lot about. And at some point in your life, a light bulb's going off to you. You're going to say, holy cats. This could become my son-in-law or daughter-in-law. If you think about it very deeply, you're going to say, this could become the parent of my grandchild. Look at the list. What's going to be most important to you about that one person on this list? You're going to be happy as long as they got good basic skills. Am I right? If you get a new board member elected because one of you decide not to run, what do you hope that new board member has? Yeah. What do you hope you get a new next door neighbor? And so, but again, you can't go faster than the rate of readiness and trust. You had to deal with all these issues this year. But if that's all you saw, you're going to have a broken system. Because you will not have prepared kids for 2025. You will have had the school survive for a year. And so we think it's going to be an evolutionary process. We don't think you start with all the internal data I gave. You start with these 3 basic areas, trying to build up over a 3 or 4 year period of time to an evolutionary way to change the system. And then being part of Learning 2025, we're going to have lots of information available for Randy and the staff about learning accelerators, which means changing technology. We're going to be showing them cutting edge technology and instructional practices that they can tie into. How to use community resources. You got some good community resources here. How to effectively tie them into health. Because remember, our staff was not trained to do any of this. We think early learning is a huge issue here. This one is not so much an issue in your district, but it is in some of our districts. A more diversified staff that is more reflective of student population. We will, June 28th through 30, and Randy, you have some people going. We're going to be showcasing and working with your staff for 3 days. Just spending 3 days going in much more depth of what I just did in the last 30 minutes. And then help them put whatever plan they think makes sense together. And come back to all of you and say, what do you think? And so that's it. I'll put up my email in case any of you have a, Randy can get me, probably easiest to go to Randy, but if anybody wants to email me, there's my email. I'll just close. Mr. Chairman, any questions, comments?
I have.
Yes, sir.
Bill, do you think a project-based learning model takes into account all those 3 skills that you mentioned?
I think it easily can. And it's an absolute major step in the right direction. And I say if it can, because Project-based learning is really, really good if your staff knows how to do it.
Correct.
Right? But, so the answer is yes.
I mean, when you look at what's happening with Tech Valley over the years they've been in existence, can you comment on the Tech Valley High School,
Great.
what they've been able to produce?
That's why Gladys was on, the best reason, comment I can give you, that's why we picked Gladys to be on the commission. Because you have it right in your own backyard. It's a great program. You know, and not only Tech Valley, even, you know, the CTE programs, the good ones, there are bad ones and there are good ones in every area. I didn't hit this at all tonight, but we dealt with economists with the commission too. Remember, we met every other week, and this was a fairly high-powered group. We brought in some of the best economists, and every one of them told us the same thing. It is only a matter of time before we go into recession. Okay, and they were predicting when the interest rates begin to climb, when inflation begins to grow, you'll know that we aren't too far away from a recession. Well, everybody, that's what they were telling us 18 months ago. What are we in the middle of right now? We go into a recession. The issue of high indebtedness in the college, I think what you're going to see is what you major in matters a whole lot. We think there's going to be that swing. Tech Valley kids got 2 steps up than everybody else. Yeah, the other program in this state that's pretty good is P-Tech, if you've heard of it. Like Fulton Montgomery, BOCES has it, a number of them have it. It's an incredible program. They take 8th graders who are struggling, pretty good kids, but just not, you know, quite making it. They put them in this P-Tech program in partnership with a community college for 4 years. And the day they walk across the stage to get their high school diploma, they're handled their associate degree at the age of 18 without a penny expense to them or their family. It's those type of programs. Any other questions?
So there's I understand there's 121 schools,
Districts.
districts that are involved. And how did they get selected?
They volunteered, but we didn't take all of them that volunteered, okay? And we look for a cross section. Minimum, they had to have a culture where we thought a culture existed in the community that would be supportive at working at change, not that they were there yet. But we also had about 30 of them that we thought were what we call the pace setters in the country, because the other 91 needed to have some reference point here. We also have big districts like Gwinnett County, okay? 310,000 kids in that school district. Union County, North Carolina with 44,000 kids. But we also got Wilder, Idaho with 310 kids. You know, so we got a true cross section of the country.
And you're going to be coaching them all towards this
Yeah,
future?
yeah. What we have done is put together, not me personally, okay. We've put together a team of what we call senior consultants who are working and helping them in a variety of ways. One of those senior consultants, by way of example, because there's different things you got to help them with. One is how do you interface with state regulations and requirements? So Mary Ellen Healy is a senior consultant helping with the state interface. Okay, they are people like Gladys, okay, who have been on the cutting edge. We hired 14 of them right out of the box to work with the schools. And then we hired a bunch of other kind of people part-time based upon a specific area of expertise. I head up a group called the Successful Practices Network. AASA, American Association of School Superintendents. 12,000 of the 15,000 superintendents in the country belong to that group. That group and my organization, I head up something called Successful Practices Network. We're jointly managing it together. I co-chair that group with Dan Dominich, who's the executive director of AASA.
Are you hoping to have a template for the other thousands of districts to follow? Is that your?
We're hoping to have a process for them to follow. But not, a template would be okay, but not a blueprint. Because we just feel every community's got their own DNA. And you gotta understand that DNA, and that's what we think school boards become so important. Tom Gensel, who's a immediate past executive director of the National School Boards Association, he's also one of our senior consultants, helping us with school boards. So these are people who have pretty deep and rich backgrounds.
Afford to do this? Like, are there grants, or are you, is this a national?
Well, the district paid a
Enterprise.
pretty modest fee,
Right.
and actually the debate up front was, do we even charge them at all? I'll tell you what the conclusion was. I don't know if you even know how we came up with it. We said, if they're not willing to put a little bit of money in it, they're not serious. And so the AASA staff and my staff have funding from foundations and other places, you know. So Ray McNulty, do you know Ray, Randy? Ray's on my staff. I'm CEO, he's president. He used to be the #2 person at the Gates Foundation. So the revenue isn't an issue for us at this point.
Bill, where are SUNY colleges in teaching new teachers on what you're describing here? Are they on board with, what are they doing to produce new teachers that are graduating from their schools, understanding what you're presenting to us?
In general, not very far. There are a couple of that I'm more in this state. I like the Oswego program. I think they're doing pretty well, but in general, I don't think they're that strong. And I have a master's and a doctorate out of Albany School of Education. So, you know, they did me well, but I'm not sure that they're there. However, Arizona State University, Carol Bazell is the dean, has done a fabulous job. We thought the best in the country. We've worked with her and identified 11 teacher education institutions across the country that we think are the best. And we're asking them to take the lead to help us with teacher education nationwide. None of those 11 are in New York State. Okay, Oswego was considered of, but you know, 11 is a pretty small number nationwide. But Carol Bazell, B-A-S-I-L-E, if you Google her, she's really on the cutting edge on this, Arizona State University. Any other question? Yes.
So just trying to think, like, we do a good job of educating like the basics. And our teachers, I think, are well prepared to take on technology. But where do we get that social emotional piece added in? Because it doesn't happen in colleges. When I'm 20 years in the classroom, and you know my colleagues, you know, they can do their teaching job,
Yeah.
and they can learn their technology pieces. But where do you bring in, or how do you bring in that social emotional piece and make it stick?
It's a great question. Let me first say, well, I don't think the universities are doing a great job at it. I do think in general, teachers have a natural aptitude to do that. Okay,
It's all over the place.
but it's all over and it's not focused, okay? But that's a very good thing, okay? If I was talking about, I don't know, are there any accountants in the room before I say the next thing? If I was talking about a team of accountants, I'm not sure that they would be good at it. We think teachers have the potential attributes. So you got to do two things. Number one, you got to show some models. What does it really mean? How the heck do I do this? Because it's not going to be a course. It's an instructional strategy. It's, you know, every day. And then number two, you got to provide some professional development and training around it.
So I think that's our biggest need, knowing kind of the district, the area. I think that would be the crux that we really need to get at.
Yeah, you're going to be sending a team to Washington. We'll be asking them to, at the end of that 3 days, try to identify what they think their biggest priorities are And then we'll try to work with them on an action plan around what they think the biggest priorities are. We're not going to pick out the priorities for a school district, but once they pick them out, but to help them pick them out, we're going to show them what some of the pace setters in effect are doing, and it'll make sense. Can we do it here at Coxsackie-Athens, or can't we? So let me close on Randy, to you, your leadership team, congratulations, because you're one of the districts that right now, they're going to be learning from last year's pace setters. But you realize 12 months from now, our goal is to have 300 to 400 school districts, from 121 to 300 to 400. You're going to become pace setters. Our hope is 2 to 3 years from now, we have to set up site visits to your district. And by the way, that's going to be an option for your district this year. Also have site visits. When you see a district, wow, that's what we should do. We'll set up site visits so you can go. We want teachers talking to teachers, board members talking to board members, superintendents talking to superintendents. With that, I've consumed too much of your evening. Thank you.
Thank
Okay, great, thanks.
Thanks. That was great.
And by the way, I am going to leave because I have an early morning flight to Washington. Extend flight tomorrow morning. So, thanks.
Thank you.
Budget. So it's a little bit harder to follow that. Kurt, no disrespect, Kurt. This is my. Just the basics. Yep. No, my GPT-2 version of the budget. So we met as a budget committee just a little while ago. We had also fielded a bunch of questions from folks in the last few days. And going into our discussion today, we wanted to, Randy has spoken about what we align our budget to when we go about building it. We related that to our 2030 destinations and our timeline, which is, I guess, part of some folks. Yep, just like that, Nicole has. That was shared with you guys previously. And then from there, we kind of picked up where we left off the other night. So the other night, we had left off with a proposed 2.92% tax levy increase, below the current 4.21% max that it could be at, and a proposed budget amount of $34,710,760. That's where we left off the other night. Since that meeting, we talked about these 4 particular pieces and how we can fit them into the existing budget, or do you not want to, what questions do you have, so on and so forth. The email, hours on the phone, they were good conversations. I'm totally doing it, that's great. We talked about primarily the top 3 here. And leaving the budget committee meeting about a little while ago now, it sounds like we're at a general consensus with those, that we're going to go forth and pilot the college credit tuition. We're going to move forward with the Let's Talk app, understanding full well that it does report or provide reports to us, so that if moving forward it's not utilized, we could consider moving on to another service or what have you. The counselor with the Flex program, this was one of the ones that a lot of folks had asked at the last meeting, why is one of the Flex programs in the general fund budget? Why is the other one in the grant? And in the end, we decided to leave the counselor in there because of what it does offer to our students, for everything that Gianna and Mason talked about to start off today, to everything that Mr. Daggett just talked about. We genuinely felt that it would, serve our students for more than possibly just Flex. Then we got down to the art and music piece, and we talked about that, and we do feel that we can make some adjustments with our existing staff.
in the existing budget, so we can pretty much, this is not a little laser thingy, we can pretty much ignore this last line here. That line was on there for the purposes of the budget committee meeting. Okay. So with that, we go back and we're still right here.
So are you adding the art music teacher? But we don't have the implication of the tax levy. Or not?
We are not adding it, we're using existing staff to add offerings, is the way I understood our conversation.
Okay, thank you.
And we spent close to an hour
Our budget,
discussing that topic.
on top of the 7, 8, 9 hours, of budget committees and meeting. So, thank you.
Just the way it was written, I didn't know.
Yep.
So you're
So,
eliminating that last line.
yes,
So
this
the-
line, this last line, there is no tax caps.
It's-
Implication as we understand it right now. We're gonna try to work with the existing.
So it still stays at 2.92.
2.92, yep.
Thank you.
The only reason I didn't take that out is because I presented this. No,
Did that time?
I didn't have, I guess I did. No excuse.
That tech stuff Bill's talking about, we'll take care of it for you.
Yeah, you know.
Next year.
GPT 3.95.
If you think that it will happen.
Yeah.
No excuses, play like a shame, right? So, those are the topics we discussed. It sounded like we were all in a much better place in understanding moving out of that. Carrie and I had talked at the end of the last board meeting, about possibly at a future meeting, not tonight, about presenting to all of you guys a more thorough concept of what it takes to start a grant, get things approved, manipulate it, so on and so forth. Just walking you through the grant process. Randy brought it up earlier. It's important to know that some grants are long lasting, like Title I funding, as opposed to the ARPA grant. So that is something that Carrie and I are going to work together on and present together to you all to hopefully help create a better understanding of how that goes.
Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for me? I'm no Mr. Daggett, but. Anything?
My slide.
So the recommendation is the $34.7 million budget. Estimated tax levy increase would be 2.92%, and that's estimated. Anyway, our tax rates are well over that. I think everybody understands town of Athens may be a little bit different. Town of That's our recommendation for the board to approve. Take the voters third Tuesday of May.
And that's on the addendum page, the exact numbers, because on this, I don't want to write anything in, just in case we decided to go with this line down here, because I don't want to write anything in on the figure packet there, so please pay attention to the addendum number.
Is that the only thing we're, besides obviously board members, that they're voting on, is just this budget?
Yeah.
There's no like projects or.
No, if we wanted, no, we decided to, I'm sure facilities committee will recommend like a capital outlay project.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that, but nothing like,
Not any board approvals, nothing.
it's huge, okay.
That works. Yeah, just the budget. Board projects.
So after this process, just to give a little insight as to where we're going with this, from here, we would go and build the property tax report card, send that up at the meeting on the 26th. We will have the Questar budget on there, as we would do every year. So then, if this is adopted today, then I get to work on developing the contingency budget as well. All right.
I do think though, the 5/9 of the people that weren't on the budget committee appreciate the work of the budget committee. And I know it's been hours and I'm trying to nail down all these details, so thank you all for that. And I think it goes to why we wanted a budget committee. You know, like, was it a year or two ago that we thought
This
about
was
it?
like
Because we wanted to know
First
more
year,
about the budget.
and
but
even
also-
when we got started, we
Yeah.
were like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What is our job? Why did we do this? And we're developing with that. And, you know, being able to thoroughly work through the budget and realize the need for a workshop that helps us to understand and connect how grant funds are being used and how that may or may not affect future budgets.
Okay. We have nothing more, right? Just acknowledge that we received 3 pieces of correspondence that we all received and we will respond or have responded. As needed. So for superintendent recommendations, personnel matters, the motion to approve B1 and 2.
So
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed, so carried. Talk about business matters, you have nothing more, right? I'll do that first. Next is to do the budget. So if we move on to the budget that was added, so need a motion to approve on the recommendation of the superintendent to adopt a budget for the 2022-2023 school year in the amount of $34,710,768.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. We have any good news anybody would like to comment on? Okay.
Oh, sure. The concerts were great this year. I got to go to them. I brought my daughter. I know we had our meeting last month. I don't know if we did that last week. But it was fantastic to see the band up there playing and the chorus all singing, and then they did the like select choir and that stuff. So my daughter had a blast and she wants to go back in June. I think that's a great way to get the little kids interested in, our music program and see if it's something they want to do. And she was singing along. I had to keep telling her to quiet down a little bit. It was great. And I like the variety that they did for that concert. Yeah.
I'm gonna pass tonight.
I really liked Bill's presentation. I thought it was really interesting and informative, and I got a lot out of it. And thanks, Ryan, for all your work. And what are you gonna do next year when the algorithm does everything?
I'm gonna beat the system.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
You don't need a robot to coach wrestling. So
Yeah.
Now you wait.
Oh.
He always runs shuttles to all the clubs he puts his kids into too.
Tough one.
Oh my God, he's so nice.
I should thank the budget committee for putting in the extra hours and extra meetings this week and getting this handled. And I wanted to say last week, I don't know for full input, but my daughter being in kindergarten has fallen in love with being in school, and it's really kind of been a pleasure for me to be a part of this board and have her coming home every day and saying how awesome school is and great and love their teachers. And I never wanted to push her to do anything, although I love sports and athletics. She is now coming home like, I want to play everything because of Coach Caldwell and the athletic staff. So they had their presentation last week and I didn't get to say it then, but I'm especially grateful for that at this point. And her, I want to play baseball and basketball. And Coach Caldwell says I can play basketball and I'm going to play. So everything. And so I'm very pleased that kind of to hear those coming back from her excitement at school.
I can let him know in the morning. When he drops off his daughter. Yes, every morning. Mr. Wallace.
Yeah, I just want to take the time again to congratulate the student council for stepping up and taking a leadership role on substance abuse and mental health issues. I've been waiting a few years for students to really get involved, and it seems like they really stepped up. And I'm looking forward to the Thursday, April 28th presentation to the community.
I was going to say the same thing. That it's great that they're stepping up and doing that for our whole community, not just the students and not just staff. Also, thank you to the budget committee for answering all my questions, and Ryan, you too. Got a lot.
The young ladies that spoke, they were amazingly prepared. And they spoke well, and that's a reflection not only of them, but of the teachers that have been behind them, working with them throughout. They were eloquent and thoughtful, and genuinely seemed to care about what it was they're doing. Good job, Laura.
Yeah, agreed. To piggyback on that, and that there are concerns for keeping it moving forward. I was thinking just like selfishly, can we get the eighth graders in there, because that's like another, but we can think about that for next year. And they did a great job presenting, and the social emotional health of students and education is something that I definitely value. And I seem to remember that pre-pandemic, you were having a lot of your guidance counselors come in anyway and doing lessons. And so you're kind of on the beginning edge of all of that. And so there's work there that you've already been doing that I feel like, with your morning meeting programs that you were having, all the things that you had before, we couldn't sit together and do things. And I don't know, I'm so happy that that's going to be a focus, because I really feel like that's important. So great job.
I just want to thank the budget committee too for asking all the good questions and stuff like that, and don't hesitate to ask more. So, but no, that's what we're trying to do. Just ask questions and we will get you the answers, the information, whatever you want to be. And yes, John and Mason did a wonderful job, and they're good kids. For that, I think we're getting there. I think our kids are realizing, it's, a math grade is good, but it's just as important to make sure that my buddy, in the other row of the classroom is healthy, as well, mentally and physically, and the wellness is just as important for the whole child. And I think we're making some great steps as a district in that area, where people are saying, yeah, this is important. I think the silver lining of COVID has certainly highlighted that.
Yeah,
and we did so many great things during COVID, and some of the things we've forgotten about. And I don't know, why don't we pick those back up? And I'll say here publicly, I'm going to try to figure out with the principals and everybody and our staff. You remember when we were totally kind of shut down those couple months in spring of 2020? We had all of our paraprofessionals and folks were getting a hold of every kid at least once a week. So why can't we do that now when they're all here? So how do we make that happen? In the sense of, and I know our agent assistants would like eat that up. They'd love to be able to do that. So that's just something, we did. I know we have parents were so appreciative of the kids were. So how do we keep thinking about what are those silver linings from the whole COVID pandemic thing we want to continue to do for that. So I just found on a personal note, my youngest is going to be a roadie in the fall from the University of Rhode Island. All right, and just again, thanks to the teachers, because Dad, of course, had to ask one of the deans of she's going to the health sciences field. She's going to get about 24 college credits when she graduates. From SUNY schools, we will accept them all. So she's going to go in, a head start, if you will. I know a lot of her classmates are in the same boat in that regard. So that's a benefit for all of our kids doing that. So kudos to our staff for stepping up and offering however many classes we have in college, 28, something like that.
Piggyback on what people were saying about the two young people that were here. I think it affirms why we're all here. why we spend all these hours doing this, to see two young people come and talk as they did, and I think part two, that hopefully they have that carryover that I think we'll look for after them, because if they can do that, that's something that's terrific. But, and the fact that they, however they did it, but they saw a critical situation, even in New York State, because for years I dealt with this, that there was either mental health or there was substance abuse, and the systems didn't talk to each other. And there wasn't any, and kids could go on either track, and sometimes they fall between the two cracks. And they say, well, you can't deal with the mental health until you deal with the substance abuse. So we're not going to deal with them. So the fact that they saw that, and hopefully maybe they can work and change that when they move on to their own careers, I think it's terrific. So very nice work on those two folks. And I think they're emblematic of what you see every day. And certainly when kids do come here to present, I'm always amazed at their poise and what they know and how they express themselves and how self-assured they are, because that was not me in 10th and 11th grade. So that's great. Good job on that. That's where you see the real benefit and the outcome of what you do with the staff and the admin team. You, Randy and I, and Carrie, what you all do when we see kids come and talk to us like that. So thank you. All right. So for future meetings, we have posted vote regular meeting on Tuesday, April 26th at 6:30 at Edward J. Arthur. We have the annual vote on Tuesday.
On that track.
Good walk. Tuesday, May 17th from 1 to 9. And we have our next regular meeting on Thursday, May 19th at 6:30 right here. We have a need for executive session.
Negotiating committee.
Okay, so just the negotiating committee is going to meet now. So just need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Thanks, everybody.
We just talked, we're gonna bring